Richard was a great believer in political revolution, and unfortunately for him, got involved in an uprising in Dresden. He barely escaped with his life, thanks to the help of his now firm friend, Liszt. He was living now in Zurich, Switzerland, with Minna, as poor as a church mouse as usual. The next opera was to be Lohengrin, the story of a knight who comes to aid a beautiful maiden and who finally returns to his own land because the maiden doesn't trust him. It is from the beginning of the third act of Lohengrin that this famous bridal march is taken. Liszt produced it at Weimar with success in 1850, but Wagner was not to hear it, as he had been exiled from Germany. Tristan and Isolde is a story which Wagner found in a book of Irish legend. It was to absorb him for almost 4 years. Wagner was asking for better and better singers, larger orchestras, often with no luck at all. In Vienna, which had planned to produce Tristan, it was canceled after rehearsals because a tenor good enough to do it justice could not be found. It was not until 1865 that Tristan was first produced in Munich. Although he mostly wrote opera, Wagner occasionally would turn his hand to other forms of music. Mathilde Wesendonck, a young, beautiful woman whom the composer had met, had written some poetry which he set to music. One of the songs, Dreams, became a study for the music to Tristan. Nothing had kept the wolf from the door. First, Wagner just wasn't earning much money. He was extravagant to the extreme, and finally, it took a lot of money to write an opera. He traveled to England, Russia, anywhere that people would listen to his music and his talk of revolutionizing opera. He returned to Paris, and at first, things seemed better. The Paris Opera was going to stage Tannhäuser and give it a splendid production. For this performance, Wagner was asked to write a ballet, which he inserted after the overture. The trouble was that Wagner blundered because he didn't know the Paris public. The Jockey Club, which contained some of Paris's noisiest young men, wanted to see the ballet but always arrived late. When they found that they had missed the ballet, the rest of the opera was booed off stage. At this worst of all moments in Wagner's life, a miracle occurred. First, he was allowed to come back to Germany. And best of all, King Ludwig of Bavaria summoned Wagner to his court. The king told Wagner that he was to have a handsome pension and a house. His operas were to be performed, with him directing, in Munich. It all seemed too good to be true. The first fruit of King Ludwig's generous gift was to be what many believe to be Wagner's greatest work, the Meistersinger. For once, it was a comic opera, the story of the medieval guilds of singers who held a contest of songs. Everything about Meistersinger is perfect, beginning with a mighty prelude. Wagner created in Hans Sachs one of the most beloved of all operatic characters. Sachs, the shoemaker, is the philosopher of the piece. The world, he sings, is mad, but all will still be right. Walter von Stolzing, the young knight who vies for the hand of the beautiful Eva, sings one of Wagner's finest melodies, the Prize Song.
Morgenlicht leuchtend in rosigem Schein, von Blüt und Duft geschwelgt die Luft, von aller Welt, die erschöpfen, ein Garten lud mich ein, dort unter einem Wunderbaum, von frischer Reich behangen, zu schauen in seligem Liebestraum, was höchstem Lust verlangen, Erfüllung in Vergiss, das schönste Weib. Eva, im Paradies.
Wagner took this opportunity to attack one of his most vicious and narrow-minded critics, a man named Hanslick. In the character of Beckmesser, Wagner skillfully portrays the untalented, thieving villain who wants to win Eva for himself.
Ist nicht leicht, ob euch die Weiß geriet und ihr den Ton erreicht.
Freund, Sachs ist ein guter Poet, so was Ton und Weise betrifft, besteht, da tut's mir keiner vor. Drum spitzt nur fein das Ohr und Beckmesser, keiner besser, darauf macht euch gefasst, wenn ihr mich ruhig singen lasst. Doch nun memorieren schnell.
The Meistersinger had its premiere in 1868 with Hans von Bülow as the conductor. As usual, it was a mixed success. The Wagnerites, as they were called, cheered it to the rafters. The anti-Wagnerites booed horribly. By this time, Wagner was no longer in bad financial difficulty and was able to devote all his time and energy to composition. He had attracted many powerful and influential friends. Among them were the greatest conductors of the age, Seidel, Mottl, Richter, and Levy. For some years, Wagner had been obsessed with the idea of adapting the old Norse legends and a German tale known as the Ring of the Nibelung to music. At first, he thought of only one opera, to be called Siegfried's Death, and for this he wrote the libretto. Later, he decided it needed a preface, to be called The Young Siegfried. And then he added two more operas, changed the name of the first two, and finally, the cycle, The Ring of the Nibelung, took shape. The operas of this gigantic work are Rheingold, The Valkyrie, Siegfried, and finally, The Twilight of the Gods. It is from this final work that we are now hearing the episode known as Siegfried's Rhine Journey. This gigantic group of operas occupied Wagner off and on for over 26 years. The book alone took 4 years to write. In The Twilight of the Gods, Wagner called for stage effects the like of which had never been seen. Siegfried's body is placed on a burning funeral pyre in a great hall. Brunhilde mounts her horse and rides into the flame. The hall collapses. The Rhine River overflows its banks and rushes into the remains of the hall. The Rhine maidens swim into it, and in the background, the home of the gods is seen also devoured by the flames of the pyre. All this has to happen on an opera stage. It was here that Wagner's early theatrical experience helped him, for he even invented the machinery to make all of these effects possible. But mere machinery wasn't enough for Wagner. He wanted an opera house designed to house his operas, and only his operas. The architect was, you've guessed it, Richard Wagner. It took years, a tremendous amount of money that even King Ludwig could not give in full. But finally, it was built in the little German town of Bayreuth and called the Festival House. And what a magnificent house it was. There were no pillars and no boxes or posts, so that everyone had an equally good view of the stage, no matter where he sat. Wagner had long since parted from poor Minna, and in 1868 she died. Soon after, Wagner married Cosima, who was the daughter of Franz Liszt, and formerly the wife of Hans von Bülow, the great conductor. Cosima presented Wagner with a son, Siegfried, and Wagner prepared a charming surprise for his beloved wife. On Christmas Day, Cosima awoke to hear the most wonderful music coming from just outside her room. What Wagner had done was compose a piece of music just for Cosima. Quietly, in the morning, the musicians had assembled on the stairs outside of Cosima's rooms, and the music was the Siegfried Idyll. Work, and more work for Wagner. He was soon composing again. This time it was to be a consecrational play of sacred nature called Parsifal, the story of the knights who guarded the Holy Grail. The Good Friday music, which we are now hearing, is one of the most beautiful pieces Wagner ever wrote. Parsifal was to be his final work, for Richard Wagner died on February 13th, 1883 in Venice. As usual, his mind was full of ideas for an opera. This one was to have been Jesus of Nazareth. It is often hard to understand, let alone to like Wagner, but it is not at all difficult to love his music, which has for so long enriched the arts.